This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, friends, we're back at it. Beis Amud Beis. Okay? Nedarim Beis Amud Beis. We're continuing in Daf Hashavua. Again, we're trying to do it with some of the basic Rans. And B'siyat Shmai, I hope we'll be able to do that. Okay, so the Gemara says, Kol kinoi nedarim k'nedarim. All nicknames of nedarim are like nedarim. Maishna gabe nazir deloi katani lekulu. You know, Masechta Nazir just says kol kinoi nazirus k'nazirus. Why doesn't it say and kol kinoi nedarim k'nedarim and kol kinoi shvuos k'shvuos and kol kinoi charamim k'charamim? In Masechta Nedarim we have a whole Megillah of all the possible subjects in Kol HaTorah Kula where nicknames are like the thing itself. Why don't we have a similar thing in Masechta Nazir? We have it by nedarim. Why don't we have it in Nazir? Maishna gabe nedarim diktani lekulu. So the Gemara says, like, look in the Ran. Maishna gabe nedarim detani kulu. Koloimar v'ilu b'mesechas nazir loy tani ela kol kinoi nazirus k'nazirus. But it doesn't say kol kinoi nedarim and kol kinoi shvuos and kol kinoi charamim. So says the Gemara, third line, mishum de neder u'shvuah ksivi gabe adadi. Nedarim and shvuos are said together in the same pasuk. Ish ki yidar neder ohi shava shvua. So we always like to put neder together with shvua. So once we put neder and shvua together, we'll throw in nazirus and charamim. So tani tartin, it taught two. V'kivan the tani tartin, tani l'kul. Once it taught two, it taught the other two. But by nazir, it doesn't say nazir together with anything else, so it says nazir alone. Says the Ran, neder shvua ksivi gabi adadi d'chsiv ki yidar neder Hashem ohi shava shvua. Fine. Frekti Gemara, v'lisni kinoi shvuos basar nedarim. Why is the order neder, cherem? Look back in the Mishnah. Neder, cherem, shvuos, nazirus. The only reason it brought all four is because neder and shvu are together. So you would think in the Mishnah it should say neder and shvu together. That's the only reason we talk about all the cases is because it says neder and shvu together in the pasuk. So let's say neder and shvu together in the Mishnah. Says Gemara, v'lisni kinu shvuos basar nedarim. No, this is the key to the Masechta. Aidi de Tana nedarim de mitzar chefza alei, Tana nami charamim de mitzar chefza alei. Since it taught neder where the item is aser to you, it taught cherem where the item is aser. La'afuke shavua as opposed to an oath, de ka'asar navshe min chefza. The item is not usher to you, you are usher to the item. This is the quintessential example of Isser Gavra, Isser Chefza. You know what the difference between a neder and a shvua is? A neder is, I have an apple. I say the apple is usher to me like a carbon. So then the apple is usher to me as a neder. It's like it's treif. So it's usher to me. There's some injection of prohibition in the apple. The apple has an Isser Chefza, the apple is Asr to me. But when I swear, if I swear I'm not going to eat an apple, it's not that the apple has no problem with me. The apple gets along with me. I don't get along with the apple. The apple has no beef with me. The apple would like to be my friend. It's just I can't consume it. By Isser Neder, the apple has a problem with me. There's some intrinsic element of prohibition in the apple that I can have it. Same goes with cherem. So when the Mishnah was listing the various prohibitions, it's grouping together in categorical understanding. Neder is Isser Chefza, cherem is Isser Chefza, as opposed to shvuos, which is an Isser Gavra. Look in the Ran. Aidi de Tana nedarim de mitzar chefza alei koloimar she'oisar hakikar alav. You're answering the kikar to you. V'oimer achilas kikar ze alai. You hear the difference between the language, the terminology of a neder and a shvua? Terminology of a neder is the eating of the item is asur to me. Achilas kikar ze alai la'afuke shvua, as opposed to an oath, where I don't say it's asur to me, I say I'm asur to it. The asur nafshe min chefza. You know, when I say a neder, I say this apple is asur to me. When I say a shvu, I say I can't eat the apple. Now, a major topic in the Rishonim is, let's say the guy mangles his expression. Let's say a guy says, I swear that this apple is asur to me. Or I take a neder that I'm not going to eat that apple. Some Rishonim say it's meaningless. You can't swear the apple is asur to you. How is the apple asur to you? You can't make a neder, you're not going to eat the apple. You're allowed to eat the apple. You can only say, I make a neder, the apple's usher to me, or I swear I'm not going to eat the apple. And other Rishonim say, no. If you say neder, we know how it operates. Despite the fact that you misrepresented the mechanics of it, it could still work, okay? But we're just going to read that part of the Ran. Fine. The Gemara continues. The Gemara asks a bomb question. Remember back in the Mishnah spoke about nicknames, and then the Mishnah spoke about a case of somebody who says, Madrani mimcha, Mafroshani mimcha, Merchukani mimcha, I'm far from you, I'm going to be distant from you, I'm going to be a neder from you, that I'm going to eat, that I'm going to taste. Remember, that was the third category called yadais. So Gemara asks, I don't understand. The Mishnah began by talking about the category of kinuyim, and then went on to explain examples of yadais. Why does it jump from kinoi to yadais? Once it gave the examples of kinoi neder, it should explain what cases of kinoi neder are. Why does it list kinuyim and then explain cases of yadais? Those are two separate categories. So the Gemara asks, Pasach b'kinuyim, it begins by talking about kinuyim, that kol kinoi nedarim umefarish yadais, and it explains the case of yadais. It says ha'omer lechaver, someone who says to his friend, mudar ani mimcha, I am usher to a neder from you. This, so that's question number one. It begins with kinuyim and it explains yadais. Visu, and second, moreover, yadais inshi. It forgot to even say there's a category of yadais nedarim. In other words, these are two distinct questions. Question number one is, why does it speaks about the category of kinuyim, and then it goes on to list cases of yadais. So it's listing the wrong type of case after speaking about kinuyim. And furthermore, the Mishnah forgot to say there's a category called yadais. So before you could explain cases of yadais, don't you need to introduce the concept that there is a concept of yadais? I mean, it's very similar questions. Question number one is, it said the category of kinuyim, why would it then list the examples of yadais? And furthermore, why didn't it establish that there is a category of yadais? Visu, yadais inshi, it forgot yadais. So the Gemara says, no. I read behind. We're talking about them. The Mishnah does talk about yadais. Where? It left it out. That's where. It's chisuri mechsera. It should have said it. By the way, chisuri mechsera does not mean that the Tana forgot it. Chisuri mechsera means that it was intentionally omitted for various reasons. Either it didn't fit the tune that they used to learn Mishnayos in, so they took it out so that the tune would be more catchy for the words. That's what the Tiferes Yisrael says. Or even though it was in the original text of the Mishnah, but when Rebbe condensed it, he did not include those words, but it actually originally said that. Okay? That's probably the more authoritative pshat in Chisuri Mechsera. Basically like this. This is very important to know. The Mishnayos used to be much bigger. The Mishnayos used to be 600 Sidarim of Mishnah, the Gemara in Chagiga says. Now we only have 6. Rebbe condensed it. Otherwise, there's no way we could hold on to it in our minds. He took much larger information and he condensed it. So when we say Chisuri Mechsera, V'Hakatani means it's missing. And in fact, this is what it used to say. It used to say in the original text of the Mishnah, Yadois Nedarim. So it said in the Mishnah, Kol Kino Nedarim Kenedarim. It said Yadois Nedarim Kenedarim. So I read behind, we were talking about it, V'Chesuri Mechsera, and it was missing. This is what it means to say Nedarim Kenedarim. Kol Kino Nedarim Kenedarim. All nicknames of Nedarim are like Nedarim. V'Yadois Nedarim Kenedarim. And all handles of Nedarim are like Nedarim. And then it goes on to explain the Yadois. So Gemara says, okay, but I still have another question. Why does it, if it first says kinuyim, and then it said yadais, why does it first explain the yadais, and then, by the way, it will explain kinuyim in later Mishnayos, so it's sort of out of order. It says kinuyim, it used to say yadais, why would it explain yadais before it explains kinuyim? So the Gemara asks, The lifroish kinuyim bereisha. Why didn't it explain kinuyim first? Says Gemara very simply. Very simply. You know why? The lifroish kinuyim bereisha. Says Gemara, no. Hahu desolik minei. Hahu mefarish bereisha. The one that it just departed from, it explains first. It said kinuyim. It said yadois. We just said yadois, so we'll explain yadois. Kedetnan, you know what examples of this are? Every Friday night. Bameh madlikin, uvama ein madlikin. What could you light with Friday night? What could you not? Ein madlikin, loy belav, right? So that's an example of, really it should have said first, Bameh madlikin. But since we just said, uvama ein madlikin, we explain Bameh ein madlikin first. Or Bameh toimnin, Bameh ein toimnin. What could you insulate with? What could you not? And then we first explain ein toimnin chul. Or, Bama isha yotza. What could a woman carry on Shabbos? Bama eno yotza. Loy teitze isha. Let's look in the Ran. The Ran says, the second to last narrow line, Pasach b'kinuyin v'su yadois. He's explaining the Gemara's question. Niroli dahachi perusha. Vadai Tana b'kinuyin Pasach. I understand that Tana began with kinuyim because, in other words, why didn't the Gemara say, you know what, an interesting way out of this could have been, the Mishnah is missing, and the Mishnah really started off, Kol Yadois Nedarim Kinedarim, V'chol Kinu Nedarim Kinedarim, and that will explain why we explain Yadois before Kinuyim. But the Ran says that would be ridiculous, that the Mishnah was missing at the very beginning. You can't be missing at the beginning. You know, you can't say, I'm part of Daf Hashavua, I just didn't come for Daf Beis. No. If you can miss other days, but not Daf Beis. If you missed Daf Beis, you didn't join the program, you know? You can't be missing in a Mishnah before the Mishnah started. So, the afilu iyamr to masis mechsara, even, says the Ran, even if you want to say the Mishnah is missing, like mechsara reisha, it can't be missing in the beginning. Shein adam mechaser b'roish dvar, person is not missing in the beginning of his words. Ela be'emtsan, only in the middle. The kivan de al karchach bekinuyim pasach, since the Mishnah had to be beginning with kinu nedarim, afilu tana nami yadois, even if it taught yadois after, and it's just missing, havalei lefrushe, Hahu de Pasach Babaresha, it should have first explained Kinuyim that it began with. And secondly, the question is, V'su Yadois in Shinu. It left out Yadois entirely. Shachachan, it forgot it. Sharoi lo hiskiran tchila k'dei she'efarish oisan. It didn't even mention it. And the answer is, Umetaritz kusha basraisa. It answers the second question that we were talking about it. And once we were talking about it, we continued to explain it. Kolay mechasura mechsara. So the Gemara asks, why don't we explain Kinuyim first? The Ran says, Kolaymar afagav de taratzta kusha basraisa, even though you answered the second question of where did Yadois go? So you say Chisura Mechsara, but shouldn't we have explained Kinuyim first? Miu kamaisa kati kasha. We still have the first question. Umetartzinan, the answer is the urche de Tana lefrushe bereisha. It's the derech of the Tana to explain first hahu desolik mina, the one that it ended off from, like bameh madlikin, bama isha yoitza, bama toimnim. So now the Gemara asks, it's not true. This is not a true approach. V'atnan, we learned in a Mishnah, yesh noichlin umanchilin. Some people inherit and bequeath, like a father and a son. If either one dies, the other one inherits, and if the other one dies, the other one inherits. In other words, a father and a son, the son could inherit from the father, and if the son dies, the son bequeaths to the father. There are some who noichlin v'loy manchilin, they inherit, but they don't bequeath, like a son and a mother, where a son will inherit from the mother, but not bequeath to the mother. And then it first explains ve'elu noichlin umanchilin. It explains the first case first. Or yesh mutaros lebalein v'asuros livameyan. There are some people who are mutter to their husband and asur to the yavam. The Ran says, what's an example of that? Mefarish v'parak yesh mutaros in yavamais. A kohen hedyot. Listen to this. A regular kohen shenasa salman, who married a widow. V'yesh la'ach kohen gadol. Right? Let's say a regular kohen married a widow and his brother is a kohen gadol. So if he dies, his brother, she's mutter to her husband, but she's asur to her yavam, because the yavam's a kohen gadol, she can't marry an almana. Or you could have a case, mutaros liyivimeim v'asuros l'baleim, mutter to the yavam, and asur to the husband. For example, let's say a kohen gadol married an almana, so the husband's asur to his wife, but she would be mutter to the yavama, v'yesh loy ach kohen hedyot. So in this Mishnah, of yesh mutaros l'baleim v'asuros liyivimeim, or mutaros liyivimeim v'asuros l'baleim, this case, it first lists the elu mutaros l'baleim v'asuros liyivimeim. It first lists and explains the first statement. Not like what we're doing here in Nedarim. Or, yesh te'unos shemen olevina, some carbon minchas need oil and frankincense. Yesh te'unos shemen olevina, some need oil and frankincense. Shemen v'lo levana, or oil and not frankincense. Ve'elu te'unos shemen olevina, the following need oil and frankincense. The Ran explains, mefaresh, 4 lines to the bottom, perakol hamenachos, minchas hasoiles v'hamachavas v'hamarcheshes. Minchas soilas machvas marcheshes need shemen v'loy levina. I'm sorry, they need shemen and levina, and shemen v'loy levina is a minchas nesachim. And there it explains the first case first. So how could you say that it's the style of the Tana to explain the case we left off from? In fact, we see it's not the style of the Tana to do that. It's the style of the Tana to explain the first case first. Or here's another example. Yesh te'unos hagasha, ve'en te'unos tnufa. Some karbanis need you to bring it close to the southwest of the Mizbeach, and yesh tunas hagashav in tunas tnufa. Some karbanis need you to bring it to the southwest of the Mizbeach. They don't need you to wave it. Some need tnufa v'lei hagasha, and they need you to wave it and not bring it close. Ve'ilu tunas hagasha. The following need you to bring it close. The Ran explains which karbanis need hagasha. Sheyagish hakoyin es hamincha bekeren jermis maravas. That the koyin bring the mincha close to the southwest corner. The chsiv zois teiras hamincha. This is the Torah of the Mincha. Hakrei voisa b'nei Aharon lefnei Hashem. Umefarshinan beperak haya mevi dahainu keren droimis maravis. So some karbanis need tenufa or hagasha. What's tenufa? Kohen maniach yadai tachas yada bailam amenif. The kohen puts his hand under the hands of the bailam and he waves. So what karbanis need tenufa and don't need hagasha, not tenufa? The Ran says hainu minchas choite. What karbanis need tenufa and don't need hagasha? That's the loig shemen of a mitzayra or the asham of a mitzayra and bikurim. Bottom line is, it says some need hagasha, some need tenufa, and it first explains those that need hagasha. Or yesh bechar lenachla, there is a bechar for inheritance, let's say the firstborn of a father, who's not the peta rechem, who's not the firstborn of the mother, ve'in bechar lekayin. Or there's bechar lekayin, you could be the firstborn for the kayin because you're the firstborn of the mother, but the father already had previous kids, ve'in bechar lenachla. And it explains, ve'ezu bechar lenachla, ve'in bechar lekayin. So we have many, many examples of where the Mishnah will first explain the first case listed and not the last case. So how could you say it's the style of the Tana that it says A, it says B, and it explains B first? We have many examples where it says A and it says B and it explains A first. So Gemara says no, there's a regular order. There's a way to categorize this. Halon mishum da avshila mefaresh hahu de pasach beresha. All these previous cases, there are many, many examples. In all these previous cases where we explain the first case first is because there are more than 2 cases. What does that mean there are more than 2 cases? In all of these previous cases, in all these examples given, it goes back to the Mefaresh Hahuda Pasuk Reisha. It is again, halon mishun da avshule. These, because there's so many cases, mafarish hahuda pasuk v'reisha. It explains the ones that it began with, because these 5 examples that the Gemara quoted, they all have 4 different categories: hagasha with tenufa, tenufa, hagasha without tenufa, tenufa without hagasha. Since in all these 5 cases there's so many examples, it's going to be confusing if we first explain the last case mentioned. So we have to keep things in order. But in our Mishnah, we we just list kinuyim and yadais, or all the other previous examples. Bama madlikin, uvama in madlikin. It's only 2 examples. Bama taimnin, uvama in taimnin. Bama isha yotza, ma isha enu yotza. It's not complicated. We could first explain the last case mentioned. Vahab, so the Gemara says, I vahab b'ma behema yotza. What about the Mishnah, b'ma behema yotza, uvama inu yotza? Where deloy avsha, there are not a lot of cases. Ukatani, and it first says, yoitzi gamal, the camel goes out. So it first explains the first case. So that's so that breaks the rule. We just said that the pattern is such that we only explain the last case mentioned when there are only 2 categories mentioned. So then why by bameh behema yotza ma ina behema yotza? There, where there are not a lot of cases mentioned, there it should explain the last case, and we don't. There we explain what bama behema yotza. So the Gemara's conclusion is, and we'll end with this, elalav dafka, it doesn't really make a difference. There's no specific style. There is no set style. The Tana could freelance. The Tana has flexibility. Whoever said that the Tana has to be boxed into one way of doing things? Let the Tana breathe a little bit. The Tana could do sometimes this way, sometimes that way. It sounds a little strange, no? Like, flexibility in how you write a Mishnah? But elalav dafka, zimnin mafarshu the pasuk reisha. Sometimes it explains the one it started with. Zimnin ahud sag mafarsh reisha. Sometimes it explains the one it ended with. And the Ran says that even though usually there's a principle of vativchar lashon arumim, that you should choose a specific methodology, nevertheless, when it comes to this, there's no specific style, and you could do however you would like. So if you wanted to know, why did the Tana start with kinuyim, go to yadais, and explain yadais first? Is it because that's a set style? No, it's not a set style. That's the style of Nedarim. And it doesn't have to conform to any other way of any other Mishnah, because there's no rhyme or reason when it comes to how a Tana, which category a Tana decides to explain before the other. Did the Tana have any reason? Maybe, but we don't know what it is. There's no model that the Tana has to conform to. Okay? So we did Daf Beis. And that's it. That's what we did. We got it done. Baruch Hashem. Thank you very much.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.